Elena Vasquez had always been different from other children in her small mountain village in Romania. While her friends played with dolls and chased butterflies, she spent hours watching hawks circle overhead, calculating wind patterns and predicting where they would dive for prey. Her father, a local hunter, noticed this unusual talent when she was barely 8 years old. "Watch the rabbit," he would whisper during their walks through the dense forest. Elena would point to a spot 20 meters ahead, and moments later, a rabbit would emerge exactly where she had predicted. Her ability to read nature's signs seemed almost supernatural to the villagers. As she grew older, Elena's gift became more refined. She could predict weather changes days before they arrived, simply by observing cloud formations and feeling subtle shifts in air pressure. The local farmers began consulting her before planting seasons, and hunters sought her advice before important expeditions. When Elena turned 16, her country was thrust into a brutal civil conflict. Foreign mercenaries had invaded the northern territories, and the government was desperately recruiting anyone with useful skills. Elena's father, now too old to fight, made a difficult decision. He brought his daughter to the military recruitment office in the nearest city. Captain Marcus Riley, a weathered British military advisor, was initially skeptical when the young woman was presented to him as a potential sniper candidate. Female snipers were extremely rare, and Elena looked more like a student than a soldier. However, something in her steady gaze and calm demeanor convinced him to give her a chance. The first test was simple. Elena was handed a standard military rifle and asked to hit a target at 200 meters. She examined the weapon carefully, feeling its weight and balance. Then, she looked at the distant target, closed her eyes for a moment, and fired. The bullet struck dead center. "Beginner's luck," muttered Sergeant Davies, another instructor. "Let her try at 400 meters. Elena repeated her ritual of careful observation and fired again. Another perfect hit. The range was extended to 600 meters, then 800. Each time, Elena's shots found their mark with unsettling accuracy. Captain Riley was impressed, but not convinced. Real combat was different from controlled range conditions. Wind, stress, moving targets, and the pressure of life-or-death situations could break even the most promising recruits. Elena was enrolled in an intensive 3-month sniper training program alongside 12 male recruits. The training was brutal, designed to eliminate all but the most dedicated candidates. They learned camouflage techniques, spent days lying motionless in uncomfortable positions, studied ballistics, and practiced shooting in various weather conditions. During classroom sessions, Elena absorbed every detail about wind compensation, bullet drop calculations, and range estimation. While other recruits struggled with the mathematical aspects of long-range shooting, Elena seemed to understand these concepts intuitively. Her instructors began to realize they were dealing with someone truly exceptional. The physical training was perhaps the most challenging aspect for Elena. She was smaller and lighter than her male counterparts, but she compensated with determination and intelligence. When carrying heavy equipment became difficult, she learned to pack more efficiently. When long marches exhausted her, she developed techniques to conserve energy and maintain focus. Psychological training proved equally important. Snipers often worked alone for extended periods, sometimes waiting days for a single shot opportunity. They learned meditation techniques to control anxiety, methods for staying alert during long periods of inactivity, and ways to cope with the intense pressure of making split-second decisions that could determine the outcome of entire battles. Elena's first real test came during a simulated combat exercise. She was positioned on a hillside overlooking a mock village where enemy soldiers were supposedly hiding. Her mission was to identify and eliminate specific high-value targets while avoiding civilian casualties. The exercise began at dawn. Elena had been lying in her concealed position since before midnight, studying the terrain and preparing for various scenarios. As the sun rose, figures began moving through the village below. Through her scope, Elena could see the subtle differences between soldiers and civilians, the way they walked, their clothing, their behavior patterns. When the first target appeared, Elena tracked him carefully through her crosshairs. She controlled her breathing, calculated the distance and wind compensation, and squeezed the trigger smoothly. The paint pellets struck the target perfectly, marking a successful elimination. Over the next 6 hours, Elena identified and successfully engaged 8 targets without a single miss or civilian casualty. Her performance was so exceptional that some instructors suspected her of having prior combat experience. After the training program concluded, Elena graduated at the top of her class. She was immediately assigned to Alpha Company, an elite unit tasked with conducting reconnaissance and elimination missions behind enemy lines. Her commanding officer, Major Thompson, had specifically requested her based on her training records. Elena's first real combat mission would come sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces were planning a major offensive against the capital city. A high-ranking enemy commander was coordinating the attack from a fortified position in the mountains. Elena's unit was tasked with infiltrating enemy territory and eliminating this threat before the offensive could begin. As Elena prepared her equipment for the mission, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. All her training had led to this moment. She carefully cleaned and calibrated her rifle, checked her camouflage gear, and studied maps of the target area. Her childhood ability to read nature's patterns would now be put to the ultimate test. The night before deployment, Elena called her father for what might be the last time. She couldn't reveal details about her mission, but she wanted to hear his voice and receive his blessing. Her father, understanding the gravity of the situation without needing explanations, told her to trust her instincts and remember everything he had taught her about patience and observation. Elena's journey from a village girl with an unusual talent to a trained military sniper was about to face its greatest challenge. The real war was beginning, and her ability to predict and adapt would determine not only her survival, but potentially the fate of thousands of innocent civilians. Elena's first combat deployment took her deep into enemy territory, where the mountain landscape reminded her of home, but held deadly secrets in every shadow. Alpha Company moved through the darkness like ghosts, each member carrying specialized equipment for their specific roles in the upcoming operation. The target was Colonel Viktor Kozlov, a seasoned military strategist who had been coordinating attacks against civilian areas. Intelligence reports indicated he would be meeting with local commanders at a remote compound nestled in a valley between 2 steep ridges. Elena's mission was to establish an overwatch position and eliminate Kozlov when the opportunity presented itself. The infiltration took 3 days of careful movement through hostile territory. Elena learned to adapt her childhood forest skills to this more dangerous environment. She noticed how enemy patrols moved along predictable paths, how guards changed shifts with clockwork precision, and how local wildlife reacted to human presence in ways that could reveal hidden positions. When they reached the designated area, Elena spent hours studying the target compound through her scope. The building was a converted monastery, its thick stone walls providing excellent protection, but also creating predictable choke points where targets might appear. She memorized every window, doorway, and potential shooting position. On the second day of surveillance, Elena spotted her target. Colonel Kozlov emerged from the main building accompanied by 4 bodyguards and walked toward a communications array on the compound's eastern side. Elena calculated the range at 847 meters, accounting for the slight upward angle and crosswind. She controlled her breathing, aligned her crosshairs, and squeezed the trigger. The shot felt perfect as it left the barrel, but when she looked through her scope, Kozlov was still standing. The bullet had struck a stone wall inches from his head. Elena was stunned. She had never missed such a straightforward shot during training. Quickly cycling another round, she reacquired her target, but Kozlov and his guards had already taken cover behind nearby buildings. The opportunity was lost. Major Thompson's voice crackled through her radio earpiece. "What happened up there?" Elena reported the miss, unable to explain what had gone wrong. She had calculated everything correctly, her position was stable, and the weather conditions were ideal. During her analysis of the failed shot, she realized she had forgotten to account for the altitude difference between her mountain training area and this higher elevation, where thinner air would affect bullet trajectory. For the next 2 days, Elena waited for another opportunity while the enemy compound increased its security measures. Guards now moved in unpredictable patterns, and Kozlov rarely appeared in open areas. When he finally emerged again, it was for only seconds at a time as he moved between buildings. Elena's second opportunity came when Kozlov appeared at a window during what appeared to be a meeting with subordinates. The range was shorter this time, approximately 623 meters, but the target was partially obscured by window frame and interior shadows. Elena adjusted for the new range and environmental factors, held her breath, and fired. Again, the shot missed. This time, the bullet shattered the window glass, but passed harmlessly through the room. Kozlov dropped to the floor and disappeared from view. Elena watched in frustration as emergency protocols activated throughout the compound. Lights went out, and figures moved rapidly between buildings in coordinated defensive patterns. The mission was compromised. Major Thompson ordered an immediate withdrawal as enemy patrols began sweeping the surrounding hills with searchlights and thermal imaging equipment. Alpha Company extracted under cover of darkness, leaving Elena questioning everything she had learned about marksmanship. During the debriefing back at base, Elena analyzed her failures with the help of Master Sergeant Rodriguez, an experienced sniper instructor. They examined weather data, reviewed her shooting positions, and calculated various environmental factors that might have influenced her shots. Despite their thorough analysis, no clear explanation emerged for the misses. Elena's confidence was shaken, but her superiors recognized that even experienced snipers sometimes faced inexplicable difficulties during their first combat missions. She was assigned to a new mission within a week, this time targeting an enemy supply convoy that regularly transported weapons and ammunition through a mountain pass. The convoy mission seemed more straightforward. Elena would position herself on a rocky outcrop overlooking the road and eliminate the lead vehicle's driver, causing the convoy to stop in a predetermined kill zone where other team members would engage the remaining targets. Elena arrived at her position before dawn and began her careful preparation routine. She studied the road through her scope, noting potential windage indicators like grass movement and dust patterns. The convoy was scheduled to pass through the area sometime between 10 o'clock and 11 a.m. At 10:37 a.m., the convoy appeared exactly as intelligence had predicted. 3 military trucks moved slowly along the winding mountain road, their engines laboring against the steep grade. Elena tracked the lead vehicle through her scope, waiting for it to reach the optimal engagement point. When the truck reached the designated area, Elena had a clear shot at the driver through the side window. The range was 412 meters, well within her capability. She applied everything she had learned from her previous failures, double-checking her calculations and environmental assessments. Elena fired, and once again watched in disbelief as her bullet missed its intended target. This time, the round struck the truck's front tire instead of the driver's window. The vehicle lurched violently, but continued moving as the driver fought to maintain control. The convoy immediately accelerated and disappeared around a bend in the road before Elena could fire again. The mission was another failure, made worse by the fact that her shot had revealed her position to enemy forces who would now know to expect sniper activity in the area. Elena began to doubt her abilities despite her exceptional training performance. Combat shooting was proving far more challenging than anything she had experienced on practice ranges. The psychological pressure of knowing that missed shots could endanger her teammates and extend the conflict was affecting her concentration in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her third mission involved providing overwatch support for a special forces team conducting a prisoner rescue operation. Elena's role was to eliminate enemy sentries and provide cover fire if the rescue team encountered unexpected resistance. This time, she would have multiple potential targets and more flexible engagement criteria. The rescue operation targeted a remote facility where 3 captured Allied soldiers were being held. Elena established her position on a hillside 600 meters from the target building, with clear sight lines to several guard positions and the main entrance. The operation began at midnight when the assault team started their approach. Elena tracked multiple guards through her scope, waiting for the signal to begin engaging targets. When the team leader gave the authorization, Elena selected her first target, a guard standing near a searchlight that could potentially expose the approaching rescue team. Her shot missed again, this time by several inches to the left. The guard remained at his post, unaware of how close he had come to death. Elena quickly adjusted her aim and fired again, but the second shot also missed, striking a concrete wall behind the target. By now, the noise from Elena's rifle had attracted attention. Guards began moving erratically, some taking cover while others searched the darkness for the source of the gunfire. The rescue mission had to be aborted when enemy reinforcements arrived earlier than expected. 3 consecutive mission failures were unprecedented in Elena's unit. Major Thompson called her into his office for a serious discussion about her future as a sniper. Elena sat across from his desk, feeling the weight of disappointment from her superiors and teammates. "I've reviewed your training records and performance evaluations," Thompson said, studying Elena carefully. "On paper, you're one of the most promising snipers we've ever trained. But combat results tell a different story." Elena struggled to explain what was happening. Her fundamentals remained solid, her equipment was functioning properly, and her pre-mission preparations were thorough. Yet somehow, when it mattered most, her shots consistently missed their targets by small but critical margins. Thompson continued, "I'm considering reassigning you to a different role where your skills can be better utilized. Perhaps intelligence analysis or reconnaissance support." Elena felt her dreams of becoming an elite sniper slipping away. She requested one more opportunity to prove herself, promising that she would identify and correct whatever was causing her accuracy problems. Thompson agreed to give her 2 weeks of additional training before making a final decision about her future. During those 2 weeks, Elena worked obsessively with Master Sergeant Rodriguez to identify the source of her difficulties. They practiced in various weather conditions at different times of day and under artificially induced stress situations. Consistently, Elena performed excellently during training, but seemed unable to translate that success to actual combat scenarios. Rodriguez suggested that the problem might be psychological rather than technical. Combat stress, even when not consciously acknowledged, could affect muscle tension, breathing patterns, and decision-making processes in subtle ways that would influence shooting accuracy. Elena began working with the unit's combat psychologist to address potential mental barriers to success. The psychological sessions revealed that Elena was experiencing perfectionism anxiety. Her reputation as a prodigy and the high expectations placed on her were creating internal pressure that manifested as minute physical tension during actual missions. This tension was barely noticeable, but sufficient to throw off her precisely calibrated shooting technique. Elena learned relaxation techniques and mental preparation methods designed to help her achieve the same calm focus in combat that she displayed during training. She practiced meditation and visualization exercises, imagining successful engagements while maintaining the peaceful mindset that had served her well during her village childhood. As her 2-week training period concluded, Elena felt more confident about her ability to overcome the psychological barriers that had been hindering her performance. However, she would soon face a mission that would test not only her shooting skills, but also her ability to adapt and survive under the most challenging circumstances she had yet encountered. Elena's 4th mission assignment came with both opportunity and pressure. Intelligence had identified General Mikhail Petrov, a high-ranking enemy commander responsible for coordinating attacks against civilian refugee camps. Eliminating Petrov could significantly disrupt enemy operations and save countless innocent lives. The mission location was an abandoned industrial complex where Petrov would be meeting with regional commanders to plan their next offensive. Elena would have multiple potential shooting positions and several windows of opportunity as the meeting was expected to last most of the day. Elena spent the entire night before the mission in meditation and mental preparation. She visualized successful shots, imagined herself remaining calm under pressure, and practiced the breathing techniques she had learned from the combat psychologist. When dawn arrived, she felt more centered and confident than she had since her first combat deployment. The insertion went smoothly. Elena's team established a perimeter around the industrial complex, while she took position in an abandoned factory building approximately 730 meters from the target location. Her elevated position provided excellent visibility of the main building where the meeting would take place. At 0900 hours, vehicles began arriving at the complex. Elena watched through her scope as various uniformed figures entered the building, but none matched the photographs of General Petrov. She waited patiently, using the time to study wind patterns and confirm her range calculations. General Petrov arrived at 1030 hours in an armored convoy that parked directly in front of the main building. Elena watched him emerge from his vehicle, a tall man with distinctive gray hair and a prominent scar across his left cheek. She tracked him through her scope as he walked toward the building entrance, flanked by bodyguards. Elena had a clear shot for approximately 8 seconds as Petrov crossed the open courtyard. She controlled her breathing, aligned her crosshairs on center mass, and squeezed the trigger smoothly. Through her scope, she watched the bullet impact the ground 2 feet to the left of her target. Petrov and his guards immediately sought cover, but Elena was already cycling another round. She reacquired the general as he moved between parked vehicles, leading his bodyguards toward the building entrance. Elena fired again, but this shot passed over Petrov's head and struck a concrete wall. By the time Elena was ready for a third shot, Petrov had reached the building and disappeared inside. Security measures activated immediately, with guards taking defensive positions and spotters beginning to scan the surrounding buildings for the sniper's location. Elena remained in position, hoping for another opportunity when Petrov eventually emerged from the building. However, the failed shots had accomplished more than just missing their intended target. They had revealed a pattern that Elena was beginning to recognize in her own performance. During the next 6 hours of waiting, Elena analyzed her previous missions and began to identify consistent elements in her failures. Each miss had been close to the intended target, suggesting that her fundamental marksmanship skills remained sound. However, the misses followed patterns that seemed to suggest external factors beyond her control. In the early afternoon, an unexpected development complicated the mission. Heavy thunderclouds began forming over the mountains, and within an hour, a severe storm system moved into the area. Rain began falling in steady sheets, reducing visibility and creating challenging shooting conditions. Elena considered requesting extraction, but her mission orders were clear. General Petrov's elimination was critical to protecting civilian populations, and this might be the only opportunity for several weeks. She decided to remain in position and adapt to the deteriorating weather conditions. As the storm intensified, Elena noticed something peculiar about the rainfall patterns around her position. Wind was driving the rain at an angle that created varying air density zones between her location and the target building. These zones would cause bullets to behave unpredictably, following curved paths rather than straight trajectories. At 1547 hours, General Petrov emerged from the building with a small group of officers. They moved quickly toward the vehicles, clearly intending to depart before the storm worsened. Elena had perhaps 10 seconds to make a shot through the rain and wind. Elena aimed carefully, attempting to compensate for the weather conditions based on her observations of the rainfall patterns. She fired and watched her bullet disappear into the storm without any visible impact. The wind and rain had made accurate shooting nearly impossible at such a long range. Petrov's convoy departed immediately, disappearing into the storm before Elena could attempt another shot. The mission was another failure, but this time Elena had gained valuable insights into the factors that might be affecting her accuracy during combat operations. During extraction, Elena shared her observations about environmental factors with Major Thompson. She explained how altitude, humidity, temperature variations, and even subtle air pressure changes could influence bullet flight in ways that weren't accounted for in standard training scenarios. Thompson listened thoughtfully to Elena's analysis. "You're describing meteorological effects that most snipers learn to recognize only after years of field experience," he said. "The fact that you're identifying these patterns suggests you understand the complexity of what you're attempting." Elena's fifth mission would prove to be a turning point in her development as a combat sniper. The target was Captain Boris Volkov, an enemy intelligence officer who had been coordinating information gathering operations against Allied forces. Volkov was scheduled to meet with local informants at a cafe in a partially destroyed town near the front lines. This mission differed from Elena's previous assignments in several important ways. The range would be much shorter, approximately 275 meters, and the urban environment would provide different challenges in the mountain and industrial settings she had experienced before. Elena established her position in the upper floor of a damaged apartment building that provided a direct line of sight to the target cafe. The shorter range meant that environmental factors would have less influence on bullet trajectory, potentially eliminating some of the variables that had affected her previous shots. Captain Volkov arrived at the scheduled time, entering the cafe with 2 bodyguards while additional security personnel remained outside. Elena could see him clearly through the large front window as he sat at a table near the center of the dining area. The urban setting created new challenges. Civilian pedestrians occasionally walked between Elena's position and the target, creating temporary obstructions. Traffic noise and the sounds of distant fighting provided audio camouflage, but also made it difficult to concentrate fully on the shot. Elena waited for an optimal moment when Volkov would be clearly visible and no civilians were in the line of fire. When the opportunity came, she carefully aimed at center mass and fired. Through her scope, she watched the bullet strike the window glass directly in front of Volkov, but the impact occurred 6 inches to the right of where she had aimed. The bulletproof glass spiderwebbed, but did not penetrate completely. Volkov and his companions immediately dropped to the floor and began crawling toward the rear of the cafe. Elena's shot had missed its intended target, but it had created chaos that might provide additional opportunities. Elena quickly reloaded and searched for another shot angle. She could see movement through the damaged window, but couldn't identify specific individuals clearly enough to engage them safely without risking civilian casualties. Within minutes, smoke grenades were deployed inside the cafe, obscuring visibility completely. Enemy forces began responding to the sniper attack, with security personnel taking positions around the cafe while others began searching nearby buildings. Elena knew she had perhaps 5 minutes before enemy forces would begin systematically checking every possible sniper position in the area. As she prepared to evacuate her position, Elena heard radio chatter indicating that Captain Volkov had been wounded during the attack. While her shot had missed its intended target, glass fragments from the shattered window had apparently caused injuries that forced his evacuation to a medical facility. Elena's 6th mission came just 3 days later. Intelligence had located Captain Volkov at a field hospital where he was recovering from his injuries. The facility was lightly guarded, making it an ideal target for a precision elimination mission. Elena approached this assignment with growing frustration about her inability to achieve clean kills despite her technical proficiency. She had begun to question whether her training had adequately prepared her for the realities of combat shooting, or whether she possessed some fundamental flaw that prevented her from achieving success when it mattered most. The field hospital mission would be different from her previous assignments. The target facility was located in an open area with minimal cover, requiring Elena to position herself at an extreme range of over 1,100 meters. At such a distance, even minor environmental factors could significantly influence bullet trajectory. Elena spent 2 days preparing for this shot, studying weather patterns, air pressure variations, and temperature changes throughout the day. She identified a brief window during the late afternoon when conditions would be most stable for long-range shooting. When the time came, Elena could see Captain Volkov through a window in the hospital's second floor. He appeared to be resting in a bed, largely immobilized by his injuries. Elena had nearly 30 seconds to make her shot before Volkov would be obscured by medical personnel entering the room. Elena made final adjustments to her scope, accounted for bullet drop over the extreme distance, and prepared to fire. As she squeezed the trigger, a sudden gust of wind struck her position, causing the rifle to shift slightly just as the shot broke. Through her scope, Elena watched her bullet strike the wall approximately 2 feet above Volkov's bed. The miss was close enough to shower him with debris, but not close enough to cause injury. Medical personnel immediately moved to evacuate Volkov to a more secure location deeper within the building. 7 missions, 7 failures. Elena's reputation within the unit was suffering, and she could sense her teammates' growing doubt about her capabilities. More importantly, she was beginning to doubt herself despite all evidence that her fundamental skills remained sound. Elena's 8th mission would test her resolve in ways that went far beyond marksmanship skills. Intelligence had identified a concentration camp where enemy forces were holding approximately 200 civilian prisoners, including women and children from nearby villages. The facility's commanding officer, Colonel Dmitry Kozlov, was known for his brutality toward prisoners and had ordered executions to begin if rescue attempts were detected. The mission parameters were more complex than anything Elena had faced previously. She would need to eliminate Colonel Kozlov and 2 key subordinates simultaneously to prevent them from ordering mass executions during a rescue operation planned by special forces. The shots would need to be coordinated precisely with the assault team's breach of the facility's perimeter. Elena studied aerial photographs and intelligence reports for days before the mission. The concentration camp was located in a valley surrounded by hills that provided several potential shooting positions. However, the facility's layout meant that her targets would be spread across different buildings, requiring rapid target acquisition and engagement from a single position. Major Thompson briefed Elena personally about the mission's importance. "This isn't just about eliminating enemy personnel," he explained. 200 innocent lives depend on your ability to neutralize the command structure before they can respond to our assault. There's no margin for error. Elena felt the weight of responsibility more heavily than ever before. Her previous mission failures have been frustrating and professionally damaging, but this mission involved the lives of innocent civilians who would be executed if she failed to perform successfully. The insertion took place during a moonless night, with Elena's team moving into position while Special Forces units prepared for their simultaneous assault. Elena established herself on a rocky outcrop 820 meters from the camp, with clear sight lines to all 3 target buildings. As dawn approached, Elena began her final preparations. She checked and rechecked her equipment, studied environmental conditions, and practiced the rapid target transitions she would need to execute during the mission. Everything had to work perfectly on the first attempt. At 0630 hours, the targets began appearing according to the intelligence timeline. Colonel Kozlov emerged from the main administrative building and walked toward the guard towers where he conducted his morning inspection routine. Elena tracked him through her scope, waiting for the assault team to signal their readiness. The radio crackled with final coordination messages between team leaders. Elena could see Special Forces personnel moving into their assault positions around the camp's perimeter. In less than 2 minutes, the operation would begin, and Elena would have perhaps 30 seconds to eliminate all 3 targets before they could respond to the attack. Alpha Team in position. Sniper, prepare to engage on my mark. came the voice of Captain Morrison, the assault team leader. Elena centered her crosshairs on Colonel Kozlov, who had stopped near a guard tower to examine duty rosters with a subordinate officer. The range was perfect, environmental conditions were stable, and her position was well concealed. This should be a routine shot for someone with her training and capabilities. Execute, 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 Morrison commanded. Elena fired at Colonel Kozlov and immediately began transitioning to her second target. Through her scope, she saw Kozlov stumble and fall, but she couldn't determine if he had been hit by her bullet or had simply taken cover in response to the gunfire. There was no time for assessment. She needed to engage the remaining targets before the alarm spread throughout the camp. Her second target, a guard commander, was visible through a window in the communications building. Elena fired rapidly and saw the window glass shatter, but again couldn't confirm whether the shot had been successful. Enemy personnel were already beginning to respond to the sounds of gunfire from the assault team's breach points. The third target had disappeared from his expected position near the prisoner barracks. Elena searched frantically through her scope for any sign of the officer who was responsible for overseeing prisoner executions. Without confirming his elimination, the entire rescue operation was at risk. Suddenly, Elena spotted movement near the rear of the administrative building. A figure in an officer's uniform was running toward what appeared to be an emergency communication station. Elena fired quickly, attempting to intercept the running figure, but her shot struck the ground behind him as he reached cover. Over the radio, Elena could hear the assault progressing with mixed success. Special forces had breached the perimeter and were engaging guard positions, but reports indicated that some enemy personnel had reached the prisoner areas and were threatening the hostages. Elena continued searching for targets through her scope while the battle raged below. She could see muzzle flashes from various positions around the camp as guards attempted to resist the assault. Smoke was beginning to rise from several buildings, creating visibility problems that would make additional precision shots extremely difficult. Sniper, we need immediate fire support on the guard towers. Enemy personnel are directing reinforcements from elevated positions. Morrison's voice requested urgently. Elena shifted her focus to the guard towers, where she could see figures moving between positions and apparently coordinating defensive responses. At this distance, engaging multiple moving targets would require rapid fire rather than the careful precision shots she had been trained for. Elena began engaging targets of opportunity, firing at any enemy personnel she could identify clearly through her scope. Her shots were hurried and less precise than usual, but the volume of fire was helping to suppress enemy responses and support the advancing assault teams. During the firefight, Elena noticed something that had been bothering her subconsciously during all her previous missions. Her shooting position was being affected by ground vibrations from nearby explosions and heavy weapons fire. The rocky surface she was lying on was transmitting shock waves that were subtly shifting her rifle between shots. For the first time, Elena began to understand one of the factors that had been affecting her accuracy during combat missions. Training ranges were generally quiet and stable, but real combat environments included numerous sources of vibration and disturbance that could influence precision shooting in ways that weren't replicated during training. The assault continued for nearly an hour before special forces secured the facility and confirmed that all prisoners had been rescued safely. Elena had fired 17 rounds during the engagement, more than she had fired in all her previous missions combined. However, she still couldn't confirm whether her initial shots had successfully eliminated the primary targets. During the post-mission debriefing, Elena learned that Colonel Kozlov had indeed been killed during the opening phase of the assault. However, it was unclear whether he had been eliminated by Elena's sniper fire or by direct engagement with assault team members who had breached his building shortly after she fired. The ambiguous results of the mission were both encouraging and frustrating for Elena. She had definitely contributed to the successful rescue operation, but her specific role in eliminating high-value targets remained uncertain. More importantly, she was beginning to identify environmental and tactical factors that might explain her previous difficulties. Elena's ninth mission would provide an opportunity to test her growing understanding of combat shooting challenges. The target was a weapons cache facility guarded by a small but well-trained security team. Elena's mission was to eliminate the guard silently, allowing a demolition team to approach the facility and destroy the weapons without alerting nearby enemy positions. This mission differed from her previous assignments because stealth was more important than rapid target elimination. Elena would have time to carefully observe conditions and make precise shots without the pressure of coordinated timing with assault teams. Elena established her position well before dawn and spent hours studying the target facility through her scope. She identified 4 guards who rotated through predictable patrol patterns, providing multiple engagement opportunities throughout the day. When the first opportunity presented itself, Elena felt more confident than she had during any mission since her deployment began. She had identified and compensated for various environmental factors, chosen a shooting position that minimized ground vibrations, and selected a target engagement sequence that would prevent surviving guards from alerting nearby forces. Elena fired at the first guard, who was standing alone near the facility's main entrance. She watched through her scope as the guard collapsed immediately, clearly indicating a successful hit. For the first time in 9 missions, Elena had achieved a clean kill on her intended target. Encouraged by this success, Elena waited for the next guard to enter her engagement zone. 20 minutes later, a second guard appeared near the weapons storage building, walking slowly while checking door locks and window security. Elena fired again and watched this guard fall as well. The third and fourth guards were eliminated over the next hour, allowing the demolition team to approach the facility safely and complete their mission. Elena's support had been flawless, marking her first completely successful combat mission. During extraction, Elena felt a mixture of relief and vindication. She had proven to herself and her team that her training and capabilities could translate to combat success when conditions allowed for proper preparation and execution. However, Elena's confidence will be tested again almost immediately. Her 10th mission involved a time-sensitive target elimination in an urban environment where careful preparation would be impossible. Enemy forces had captured an Allied intelligence officer who possessed information about planned operations. The prisoner was being held in a downtown building and will be transported to a more secure facility within hours. Elena had less than 3 hours to position herself and eliminate the transport team before the prisoner could be moved. The urban environment provided limited shooting positions, and civilian activity in the area made the mission extremely challenging from both tactical and legal perspectives. Elena established her position on the roof of an apartment building approximately 450 meters from the target location. The range was well within her capabilities, but the urban environment created numerous complications. Wind patterns between buildings were unpredictable, civilian pedestrians frequently obscured sight lines, and potential collateral damage concerns limited her target engagement options. When the transport convoy arrived, Elena could see the captured intelligence officer being moved from the building toward a waiting vehicle. She identified multiple potential targets among the enemy personnel, but needed to avoid civilian casualties while ensuring that the prisoner could be rescued safely. Elena selected a target and fired carefully, but her shot missed by several inches, striking a vehicle window instead of the intended guard. The miss created immediate chaos as enemy personnel took cover and began scanning surrounding buildings for the sniper's position. Within minutes, Elena's position was being suppressed by return fire from multiple directions. She was forced to evacuate immediately, leaving the mission unsuccessful and the intelligence officer still in enemy custody. Elena's performance record now included 1 clear success among 10 missions attempted. While the successful mission had proven that her capabilities remained sound, the overall pattern of failures was becoming increasingly difficult to explain or accept. Elena's 11th mission assignment came with an ultimatum from Major Thompson. Her inconsistent performance had become a liability that the unit could no longer accept. This would be her final opportunity to prove her worth as a combat sniper, and failure would result in immediate reassignment to a non-combat role. The target was General Alexander Petrov, the highest-ranking enemy commander in the region and the architect of attacks against civilian populations. Intelligence indicated that Petrov would be conducting a personal inspection of frontline positions, providing a rare opportunity to eliminate a target whose death could significantly impact the course of the conflict. The mission location was a heavily fortified observation post on a mountain ridge where Petrov would be coordinating artillery strikes against Allied positions. Elena would have a single window of opportunity when Petrov emerged from his bunker to observe the effectiveness of his bombardment. Elena spent the night before the mission in deep reflection about her journey from village girl to sniper candidate to combat failure. She thought about her father's teachings regarding patience and observation, her exceptional performance during training, and the mysterious factors that seemed to conspire against her during actual combat situations. As she prepared her equipment, Elena decided to approach this mission differently than all her previous attempts. Instead of relying solely on technical calculations and standard procedures, she would trust the intuitive understanding of natural patterns that had served her well during childhood. The insertion took Elena to a position approximately 1,200 meters from the target observation post. The extreme range would challenge even experienced snipers, but it also meant that environmental factors would have maximum influence on bullet trajectory. Elena decided to view this as an advantage rather than an obstacle. Elena established her shooting position before dawn and began the most thorough environmental assessment she had ever conducted. She studied air temperature variations, humidity levels, wind patterns at different altitudes, and atmospheric pressure changes. More importantly, she began to feel these conditions rather than simply measuring them. As the sun rose, Elena noticed subtle differences in air density caused by thermal layers between her position and the target. These invisible variations would cause bullets to follow curved paths rather than straight lines, explaining many of her previous misses. The key was learning to predict and compensate for these atmospheric disturbances. At 0800 hours, artillery fire began impacting Allied positions in the valley below. Elena could see muzzle flashes from enemy gun positions and watch the explosions ripple across friendly defensive lines. She knew that General Petrov would emerge shortly to personally observe the results of his bombardment. Elena waited patiently, feeling more connected to her environment than she had during any previous mission. She could sense wind patterns changing with temperature fluctuations, predict pressure variations caused by the artillery explosions, and anticipate atmospheric disturbances with an accuracy that reminded her of childhood predictions about weather and animal behavior. At 0847 hours, General Petrov emerged from the bunker complex and walked toward an observation platform that would provide him with clear views of the artillery strike zones. Elena tracked him through her scope while making final calculations based on her intuitive reading of environmental conditions. As Petrov reached the observation platform and raised binoculars to survey the bombardment, Elena prepared to fire. However, at that moment, heavy smoke from the artillery strikes began drifting across the valley, creating a dense haze between her position and the target. The smoke presented Elena with an impossible shooting challenge. Standard military doctrine would require her to wait for visibility to improve before attempting such a critical shot. However, intelligence indicated that Petrov's visit would be brief, and this might be her only opportunity for several months. Elena studied the smoke patterns through her scope, watching how the wind currents moved the dense clouds across the valley. The smoke wasn't uniform. There were gaps and variations in density that created brief windows of partial visibility. However, these windows lasted only seconds and occurred unpredictably. As Elena watched the swirling smoke, she began to recognize patterns in its movement. The thermal currents created by explosions and fires were causing the smoke to flow in predictable cycles. Elena realized she could anticipate when brief visibility windows would occur and prepare to fire during those moments. Elena waited for nearly 20 minutes, studying smoke patterns and preparing for a shot opportunity that might last less than 2 seconds. During this time, she could occasionally glimpse General Petrov through the haze as he moved around the observation platform, but never for long enough to guarantee a clean shot. At 0906 hours, Elena predicted that a gap in the smoke would occur within the next 30 seconds based on the wind patterns she had been observing. She prepared her rifle and controlled her breathing while waiting for the precise moment when visibility would improve enough for her shot. The gap appeared exactly when Elena had predicted. Through the swirling smoke, she could see General Petrov clearly for what she estimated would be approximately 3 seconds before the smoke closed again. Elena had to fire immediately, trusting her intuitive compensation for the smoke-filled environment. Elena squeezed the trigger smoothly, sending her bullet through the smoke-filled air toward a target she could barely see. The shot felt different from all her previous attempts, more instinctive and less calculated. Elena had fired based on feeling rather than technical analysis. Through her scope, Elena watched the smoke swirl closed again, obscuring her view of the target area. She couldn't see the results of her shot and would have to wait for the smoke to clear before determining whether she had finally achieved success or experienced another failure. The wait seemed endless as Elena watched smoke patterns through her scope. Radio chatter from forward observation posts indicated that the artillery bombardment had stopped suddenly, but Elena couldn't determine whether this was related to her shot or simply a scheduled pause in the attack. After 15 minutes, the smoke began to thin enough for Elena to see the observation platform clearly. The area appeared empty, with no sign of General Petrov or his accompanying staff members. Elena couldn't determine whether her target had been eliminated or had simply returned to the safety of the bunker complex. Elena remained in position for another hour, hoping to see some indication of whether her shot had been successful. Eventually, she noticed increased activity around the bunker complex as vehicles arrived and personnel moved with apparent urgency. The activity suggested that something significant had occurred, but Elena still couldn't confirm the results of her mission. During extraction, Elena felt a strange mixture of confidence and uncertainty. Her shot had felt more accurate than any she had attempted during her previous missions, but the smoke-obscured conditions made confirmation impossible. She would have to wait for intelligence reports to determine whether she had finally achieved her first major combat success. The debriefing took place 12 hours later when intelligence analysts had time to review intercepted enemy communications and reconnaissance reports. Major Thompson's expression was unreadable as he reviewed the accumulated information about Elena's mission. "Congratulations, Elena," Thompson said finally. "Intelligence confirms that General Petrov was killed during the artillery observation mission. Enemy communications indicate that he was eliminated by sniper fire at approximately 0906 hours, which matches the timing of your shot." Elena felt a wave of relief and vindication wash over her. After 11 missions and countless doubts about her abilities, she had finally achieved the success that everyone expected from her training performance. More importantly, she had learned to trust her instincts and adapt to combat conditions in ways that no training program could teach. Thompson continued, "Your shot was particularly remarkable because intelligence indicates that visibility was nearly zero due to smoke from the artillery strikes. Enemy reports described the shooting as impossible under the prevailing conditions." Elena explained her approach to the mission, describing how she had learned to read environmental patterns intuitively rather than relying solely on technical calculations. She discussed the importance of adapting to combat conditions and trusting instincts developed through careful observation of natural phenomena. Thompson listened thoughtfully to Elena's analysis. "You've learned something that takes most snipers years to understand," he said. "Technical proficiency is essential, but combat success requires the ability to adapt and improvise under impossible conditions." Elena's success against General Petrov marked a turning point in her development as a combat sniper. Her subsequent missions demonstrated consistently improved performance as she learned to combine her technical training with intuitive environmental awareness. The failures that had characterized her early combat experience became valuable learning opportunities that ultimately made her more effective than snipers who had never faced such challenges. Years later, Elena would become one of the most successful snipers in her unit's history. Her ability to make accurate shots under impossible conditions earned her respect from colleagues and fear from enemies. However, she never forgot the lessons learned during her early mission failures and the importance of adapting to circumstances that couldn't be replicated in any training environment. The smoke blind shot that eliminated General Petrov became legendary within special operations communities. Elena's willingness to attempt an impossible shot based on intuitive understanding of environmental conditions demonstrated the kind of adaptive thinking that separated exceptional snipers from merely competent ones. Elena's journey from repeated failure to ultimate success illustrated the complexity of transitioning from training to combat. Her technical skills had always been sound, but learning to apply those skills under the chaotic and unpredictable conditions of actual warfare required experience that could only be gained through trial and failure. The mountain village girl who had predicted animal movements and weather patterns had finally learned to apply those same observational skills to the deadly precision of military sniping. Elena's childhood gift for reading natural signs had evolved into a combat capability that would save countless lives and influence the outcome of numerous military operations. Elena's story became an inspiration for future sniper candidates who struggled with the transition from training to combat. Her example demonstrated that initial failures didn't necessarily indicate inadequate preparation or lack of capability. Sometimes the most valuable skills could only be developed through direct experience with the challenges and uncertainties of actual warfare. The sniper who had missed repeatedly until she took a smoke blind shot had discovered that success often required the courage to attempt the impossible when conditions demanded it. Elena's willingness to trust her instincts and fire through smoke that obscured her target represented the kind of decisive action that defined truly exceptional military professionals.